Today is September the 22nd. Is Israel still God's people? Let's find out together as we read Romans 9-11. Today, in reading through the Bible in a year, I'd like you to read 3 chapters in Romans, chapters 9-11. We have read through the first 8 chapters. It's Paul's theology. It's Paul's statement of what salvation truly is. When he gets to chapter 9, he now wants to deal with the question, well, if God saved Israel in the Old Testament, is Israel still saved? Now, the way he answers that in chapter 9, verse 4, he says, they are the people of Israel, chosen to be God's adopted children. God revealed his glory to them. He made covenants with them, and he gave them his law. He gave them the privilege of worshiping him and receiving his wonderful promises, God's word. So it looks like Paul starts off saying, yes, Israel is still God's people. But look at what he does in verse 6. So has God failed to fulfill his promise to Israel? No, for not all who are born into the nation of Israel are truly members of God's people. Then he draws distinctions between Abraham's 2 sons, Isaac and Ishmael, and then Isaac's 2 sons, Jacob and Esau. And he talks about how God turned some away, but accepted others. Now he's preparing for a very, very clear argument that he's going to make. In verse 25, he says, concerning the Gentile, God says in the prophecy of Hosea, those who were not my people, I will now call my people. I will love those whom I did not love before. Paul clearly says God has opened the door to Gentiles. But let's come back to the original question. What about the Jewish people? In chapter 10, he goes back to the core of his theology, and he says salvation is not a matter of genetics. Salvation is a matter of faith. In verse 4 of chapter 10, he says, Christ is the end of the law for salvation. What he's saying there is that Christ, through his death on the cross, finished the purpose of the law. He terminated the purpose of the law for salvation. Salvation now comes by faith, not by obedience to the law. In chapter 11, Paul says, I ask then, has God rejected his own people, the nation of Israel? And he says, of course not. I'm an Israelite. God has accepted me. And over the next several verses, Paul draws the distinction between Jews who believe and Jews who reject Jesus, the Messiah. Is Israel still God's people? Paul says yes, but he redefines Israel. Israel consists of Abraham's sons, the sons who have faith like Abraham did. Whether they were born a Jew or born a Gentile, if they have faith, they are adopted into Abraham's family. Paul, at the end of chapter 11, uses the image of an olive tree. An olive tree was the symbol of Israel. He says God has pruned off many branches in the olive tree, and he has grafted into the tree wild olives. Very clear indication. Yes, Many Israelites are still saved. They are still God's people if they have faith in God. Many Gentiles become God's people if they have faith in God. At the end of chapter 11, Paul says, keep on believing, because if you turn away from God, he can cut you out of the olive tree just like he did some of Israel. In fact, if those who left believe, they can also be grafted back in. Like, follow, and subscribe to this devotional on whatever platform you use to listen to it. Email your questions to us at questions@becomehope.com. Tomorrow, we'll answer the question, why did Paul write the letter to the Romans?